Before I start this video, I wanna make a useful remark. There are two different sides of Hollywood. The first is more independent and creative driven. There are many good directors like Ari Aster, Jordan Peele and Chloe Zhao working these days. Not all of their movies are amazing, of course, but they always have interesting ideas, stories and interesting visions. I'm not gonna be talking about this side of the industry. I think it's absolutely fine now. But I want to discuss another side of Hollywood, big commercial franchises. This is where Hollywood has noticeable problems right now. The idea for this particular video came to me quite spontaneously. I was just checking the box office of the newest Indiana Jones movie one morning, and the result is pretty terrible. With an estimated budget of $300 million, a large portion of which was spent on expensive de-aging technology, it is safe to say that the movie already bombed at the box office. And it didn't surprise me at all. If you check out trailers on the official Lucasfilm channel on YouTube, likes are disabled, which is always a bad sign, and most comments are either negative or sarcastic. And it was even before the movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival and was poorly received by the press. This led me to thinking. New Indiana Jones is not the first Disney movie this year that either severely underperformed or straight up flopped. The Little Mermaid released in May only earned a little more than $500 million, while similar movie Aladdin grossed over $1 billion in 2019. Both The Little Mermaid and Aladdin have approximately the same level of recognizability, and both were also released in China. Elemental completely flopped despite being a part of the Pixar brand. The third Ant-Man and the Wasp also didn't make too much, and only the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was successful. It would be naive to assume that only Disney faces such problems though. Both Shazam and The Flash failed miserably at the box office. Transformers Rise of the Beast made even less than The Last Knight, much less. The Fast and Furious franchise also declines from movie to movie. It peaked with the 6th movie, and after that every next movie grosses less and less money, with budgets getting comically high. This trend of big blockbusters failing is going for quite some time. About 6 or 7 years ago, Hollywood had so many safe, reliable franchises that companies were sure would make a lot of money. In 2016, Marvel's Civil War grossed over $1 billion, and Doctor Strange was doing just fine for a movie about a comparatively not very well known character at that time. Marvel knew that their next movies would be successful too. It was hard to imagine a Marvel movie actually failing. Even DCU movies were doing great despite their frankly questionable quality. The Force Awakens became the third highest grossing movie of all time. The Hobbit trilogy that ended in 2013 had mixed perception, but despite that each movie was a huge box office hit. Disney was preparing to release the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean. Live-action remakes were on the rise. And should I say anything about Transformers and Fast and Furious? Blockbuster strategy seems to be working pretty great. You make a big, expensive, action-packed movie that is a part of a familiar franchise. Actual quality is secondary, and then just sit and wait. Formula of success. Today the strategy is not working anymore. There aren't really many safe franchises left for Hollywood companies to exploit, if we think about it. Let's begin with Disney. Their live-action remakes aren't guaranteed hits anymore. You cannot just throw a Hercules movie into theaters and expect it to gross $1 billion. It might very well repeat the fate of The Little Mermaid. Not every MCU movie is a guaranteed success either. I can't really guarantee that Marvel's will be successful. Even Kang the Conqueror, the next MCU big villain, could not bring people to theaters to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp. Star Wars franchise is also in a weird position. The next trilogy will not be about the Skywalkers. If the movie about Han Solo flopped, who can guarantee that new and familiar characters will lure people into theaters? Even if new movies will have Ahsoka or Mandalorian, these are TV characters, and not every moviegoer watches TV shows. Warner Bros. Are gambling now with their new restarted DC universe. The first movie, Superman Legacy, is set to be out in 2025, and it's not quite clear how it will be perceived in general. So-called Monsterverse, the shared universe featuring Kong, Godzilla, and other monsters from classical Godzilla movies, isn't looking great either right now. It's funny how Warner Bros. Made not one, but two attempts to replicate Marvel's success by creating a big shared universe, and both those attempts fell flat on their faces. Another Warner Bros. Franchise is the Wizarding World, but Fantastic Beasts movie series is dead. There is nothing really to comment here. Sony is struggling with movies about Spider-Man villains, especially after Morbius, which was deliberately falsely advertised to look like it was a new MCU movie. Now there are almost zero hopes for Kraven the Hunter. It might be actually good, but we all understand it is highly unlikely. And we didn't even touch animation yet. Pixar and Disney movies used to be guaranteed hits. Just look at Frozen and Zootopia. Every new Pixar movie used to be such a big event. These days Disney and Pixar suffer flop after flop. Lightyear, Strange World, Elemental, and who knows if Wish or Elliot new original cartoons will be successful. Disney understands that perfectly, so this year they announced a whole batch of sequels, such as Toy Story 5, Zootopia 2, Frozen 3, and even Inside Out 2. Sequels are a much safer bet than original stories. Original stories do not guarantee success. Disney might exploit their previous successful movies even more in the future. Who says that we won't get WoW 2 or something like that? It might seem like DreamWorks is doing better, but it's not really true actually. The only recent DreamWorks success was Puss in Boots 2. So DreamWorks also works to bring old franchises back to avoid more risks in the future. They are even making How to Train Your Dragon live action remake. Just half a year ago it was something I could not expect at all, but it's actually happening. Maybe DreamWorks live action movies will have a more genuine creative approach than their Disney counterparts, and we'll get decent movies at the end of the day. But we can only guess now. But what is the reason for such drastic decline in recent years? By far the biggest reason is movie quality. People realize that big companies aren't really trying to make good movies and greatly rely on recognizability of their brands to attract people. The 2010s didn't even give us many interesting new franchises. The 2000s gave us The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, etc. MCU started in 2008. I can only think of DCU and Monsterverse for 2010s. Also John Wick, but it's not really a big blockbuster franchise despite its popularity, so it probably doesn't count. The 2010s were mostly exploiting successful franchises that were created before. And the 2020s aren't much better so far, but Dune and DC movies that aren't attached to any shared universe give us some hope. Another reason is that the prices for tickets and snacks aren't exactly cheap, so many people figure that it's not worth spending money to watch another piece of mediocrity in the theater, and prefer to enjoy streaming services instead. The same day DreamWorks released Ruby Gillman Teenage Crack and Netflix released Nimona. So I think if you have a choice between Ruby Gillman and Nimona, for most people the choice is obvious. Avatar movies always felt different compared to other blockbusters. Both films do not really have a great story, but they revolutionized CGI technology. Avatar: The Way of Water is the most technologically advanced movie to this date. Both Avatar movies are theatrical experiences which you can't reproduce at home without using proper technology. So there is pretty much no point in watching Avatar movies outside the theater. This is why both movies gross so much at the box office. This is why some older movies like Jurassic Park, Titanic, and The Lion King were remastered and released again in theaters in 3D. I would also like to mention some other factors. COVID-19 pandemic. Even though it greatly affected movies' theatrical release in 2020 and 2021, I don't believe it is a huge factor now in 2023 since most countries lifted strict pandemic rules. Some people might detest movies for having LGBTQ+ representation in them. Although this kind of audience is very loud, it's just a small part of it. Most people just want to enjoy a good story. Plus only Disney movies have representation and not even all of them. Some might say that the reason movies underperform is because China has gotten stricter. and the CCP doesn't let foreign movies into the country. To be honest, the significance of the Chinese market is greatly overrated by the media. Aladdin, for example, made only 55 million in China, and without China the movie still would have had almost a billion. Plus, movies like Spider-Man No Way Home and Top Gun Maverick were massive hits even without Chinese market. In conclusion, I'd say that Hollywood needs to change its strategy. It needs to focus on movie quality now and depend less on old franchises, and instead try to do something new. Something like adapt stories that haven't been adapted before. Dune and The Batman are examples in which direction the blockbuster movies can go from now on. Some may say we have streaming services that produce quality content, but streaming films do not have nearly as much exposure as films made for theaters. Plus, they're usually much cheaper to produce. It's really hard to make something like Dune for Max or Netflix. Not to mention that films like Avatar would not exist without movie theaters. This is why movie theaters are still largely important. I'd also say that companies should focus more on producing quality animation. Spider-Verse movies are very successful and innovative. Maybe more animated adaptations of comics and books in the future.